My son's wife looked at me with cold eyes and said the words, "I'll never forget. You don't contribute enough to stay here." My son's wife looked at me with cold eyes and said the words I'll never forget. "You don't contribute enough to stay here." The words hit me like a slap across the face. After all these years raising my son, helping them with down payments, moving in to care for their kids, this is what I get. A label. Burden. I felt my heart twist, my breath catch in my chest. The walls of that house, once filled with family dinners and children's laughter, suddenly felt tight, like they were closing in on me. I wanted to scream to remind them of every meal I cooked, every diaper I changed, every sleepless night spent worrying about their future. But I didn't. I just sat there frozen as my son looked away and my daughter-in-law crossed her arms waiting for an answer. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like your years of love and sacrifice suddenly mean nothing. I couldn't believe this was happening. My own family, turning me into a guest in the home I helped build. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd keep helping, keep paying, keep fading into the background like some piece of old furniture. But they forgot one thing. I may have been quiet, but I wasn't powerless. And that's when I knew it was time to stop contributing in silence. I'm 62 years old. I used to be an elementary school teacher. 30 years of shaping young minds, teaching kids how to read, how to dream, how to believe in themselves. After my husband passed away, I thought I'd finally slow down. My son Ethan invited me to move in with him and his wife Lisa. He said it would be easier for everyone I could help with the kids. They could keep an eye on me, and we'd all be one happy family. At first, it seemed fine. I'd cook dinner while they worked late. I'd fold their laundry, make school lunches for the kids, even clean up the kitchen after long family meals. I paid for groceries most weeks. I chipped in on bills when I could. I even helped them furnish the house, gave them $50 to $1,000 for the down payment when they bought it. But as time passed, things changed. Lisa became distant. She'd make offhand comments like, "It must be nice not having a real job," or, "You don't really contribute around here, do you?" Her tone was sweet, but the words cut deep like tiny knives, disguised as kindness. Ethan, my son. He stayed quiet. He never defended me. I'd catch him staring at the floor when Lisa spoke, as if the weight of her words was too much to challenge. It broke my heart. I started noticing little things. My place at the dinner table shifted from the head of the table to the side, then eventually to a stool by the kitchen counter. They stopped including me in family decisions like where to go on vacation or how to spend the tax refund. I felt like a ghost in my own home, a silent figure in the background, fading with every passing day. And the mortgage, oh, the mortgage. They never said it out loud, but I knew they relied on my contributions to make it work. That $2,100 every month wasn't pocket change. Without it, things would get tight fast. But they didn't see that. They saw me as a burden, as someone who just took and didn't give. There was a night I overheard Lisa talking on the phone, her voice low but sharp. "She's just here taking up space. If she's not helping, why is she still here?" My stomach twisted. I felt like I was intruding in a place I once called home. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But the next day, Ethan barely spoke to me. The kids didn't say goodbye when they left for school. And Lisa, she just smiled, that tight, polite smile, as if I were an obligation she was tolerating. That's when it hit me they didn't see me as family anymore. I wasn't a mother, a helper, or a part of their life. I was a problem to be managed, an expense to be trimmed. I sat alone in the guest room that night staring at the mortgage statement on the table. The $2,100 payment. the bank's logo, my name printed in small letters as the co-signer. And I realized something they hadn't considered. I wasn't just a burden. I was holding up their house of cards. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let it fall. It happened on a Thursday evening, just as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I had spent the afternoon folding laundry, scrubbing the kitchen, and even baking a fresh batch of banana bread, Ethan's favorite, though he never seemed to notice anymore. As I set the warm loaf on the counter, I heard the front door open. Lisa's heels clicked across the hardwood, sharp and precise, like the sound of a gavel hitting wood. She breezed past me without a glance, her voice already raised as she called for Ethan. "We need to talk about the budget," she said, her tone clipped as if the word itself was an inconvenience. I stood there, dish towel in hand, listening as they moved into the dining room. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay quiet just like I always did. Then I heard it clear, cold, and cutting. "I don't think it's fair that she stays here if she's not contributing enough. It's not sustainable, Ethan. We have to think about the kids, about our future. We can't keep carrying her like this." Her words sank into my chest like ice water. I felt my breath catch my hands trembling. My son murmured something too soft to hear, but he didn't disagree. He didn't defend me. I stood there frozen in the kitchen, the banana bread cooling in front of me untouched. The conversation continued, voices rising and falling like waves, but I couldn't focus on the words. I could only hear the pounding of my own heart, the sting behind my eyes, the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. Then Lisa's voice cut through again, sharper this time. "She's a burden, Ethan. She's not contributing. We can't afford to keep her here unless she helps more." Burden. That word again. It rang in my ears, echoing, bouncing around the walls of my mind like a cruel joke. Have you ever felt like you've been erased? Like everything you've ever done, every sacrifice, every moment of love and care has been wiped clean by a single word? I wanted to burst into that room and remind them of the years I spent working 2 jobs so Ethan could go to college. I wanted to scream about the $50,000 I gave them for the down payment, about the countless nights I rocked their babies to sleep while they went out for date nights. I wanted to shake them and make them see me not as a burden, but as the backbone of this family. But I didn't. I stood there silent, my hands gripping the dish towel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife a little deeper, I heard Lisa's voice drop to a whisper, just low enough that she probably thought I couldn't hear. "If she's not paying her share, maybe it's time to have a serious conversation about her moving out." Moving out. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My knees wobbled. I had nowhere else to go. My retirement savings were modest at best. This house, this family was supposed to be my safety net. But in that moment, I realized it wasn't a safety net at all. It was a trap. And I was the unwanted guest they were quietly planning to push out. That night I sat alone in the guest room, the walls closing in. I stared at the mortgage statement on the nightstand, $2 $100 due in 5 days. My name was still there, printed neatly at the bottom, the co-signer, the one who had quietly helped them keep this house afloat. And as I stared at those numbers, something shifted inside me. They thought I was a burden. They thought I wasn't contributing enough. Let's see how they do without my contribution. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I had bent over backward to make everyone else happy. I had swallowed my pride, my hurt, my frustration, all for the sake of peace. But not anymore. That night I made a decision. A quiet one, but a decision nonetheless. I would stop paying the mortgage. No big announcements, no confrontation, no shouting match at the dinner table. Just stop. Let them feel the weight of that 2 to 100 every month. Let them scramble to make ends meet. Let them sit in that same uncomfortable silence I had been forced to live in. I folded the mortgage statement carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and tucked it away in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. And then I sat back on the bed, exhaled a long, steady breath, and whispered to myself, they wanted me gone. Let's see how they manage. When the foundation starts to crumble. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was still quiet, the sun barely peeking through the curtains. I sat at the small desk in my room, the mortgage papers in front of me, and began to read. Really read. Every line, every clause, every small print that I had ignored for years, because I trusted them, because I believed I was family. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just a co-signer, I was the co-borrower. My name wasn't just there for show. I had legal power, the kind they never thought to question. My signature mattered. My presence wasn't a favor. It was a necessity. Without me, the mortgage couldn't exist. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me, and oddly, it wasn't fear. It was power. Quiet, simmering power. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. That evening, I watched them. Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling on his phone. Lisa was at the dining table, her laptop open, papers spread around her, like she was running the world. They looked so sure, so confident, so smug. I wondered just for a moment if I had been too soft all these years. Maybe I had let them believe I was just a burden, a harmless aging woman with no say in her own life. But they were wrong. That night after they went to bed, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I pulled out the original mortgage documents, the thick official packet we had signed together at the bank. The memory came flooding back, Ethan's nervous smile, Lisa's tight grip on her designer purse, my pen hovering over the signature line, trusting them because they were family. And then I saw it co-borrower Mary Thompson, my name clear as day right there in bold. I flipped through the papers and a small folded note slipped out. An old reminder from the loan officer scribbled in haste. Remember Mary? If you withdraw your support, they'll have 30 days to refinance or face default. My heart raced. My breath caught in my throat. 30 days. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had sacrificed for this family. The birthdays I had planned, the school plays I had attended, the tears I had wiped from Ethan's face when he was little. And now, I was just a burden. I thought about the quiet sacrifices, the money I had put into this house, the groceries, the utilities, the after-school programs for the kids. None of it had mattered. They had erased me with a single sentence. The next morning, I made a decision. I called the bank. My voice trembled at first, but the woman on the other end was kind. She explained the process, the options, the paperwork. I listened carefully, taking notes. My hands were steady. Then I asked the question that would change everything. If I stop paying my portion, what happens? Her answer was clear, almost too simple. They will have 30 days to make up the full payment, or the loan goes into default. 30 days. I thanked her, hung up, and sat back in my chair. I felt lighter. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a smile of defeat, but a quiet, knowing smile. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was just an old woman with no options. But they forgot. I was the one holding the rope. That afternoon, Lisa was bustling around the house on the phone. As always, talking loudly about some upcoming fundraiser, her voice dripping with authority. I watched her from the kitchen, the way she waved her hand dismissively when I tried to ask if she wanted dinner. Not now, Mary. I'm busy. Not now, not ever. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, I placed a copy of the mortgage statement on the table. Ethan looked up, puzzled. Lisa barely glanced at it. "I'm no longer paying my portion of the mortgage," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. Silence. Ethan blinked, unsure if he heard me right. Lisa's fork froze midair. "What do you mean you're not paying?" Lisa's voice rose sharp, incredulous. "I mean exactly that," I replied, folding my napkin neatly. "I've been contributing for years. Now it's your turn." Ethan's face flushed, a deep red creeping up his neck. Lisa's eyes narrowed, her lips parting in disbelief. "You can't just stop," she snapped. "I can," I said softly, leaning back in my chair. "And I have." Their world shifted in that moment. I could see it, the panic, the scramble for control, the sudden realization that they had underestimated me. I let the silence settle, let the weight of my words fill the room like a storm cloud. Then I stood up, smoothed down my sweater, and said goodnight. I walked away, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence, the mortgage statement glaring up at them like a mirror they couldn't escape. The days that followed were a slow, unraveling storm. At first, they tried to pretend nothing had changed. Ethan avoided eye contact, burying himself in work, while Lisa moved around the house with forced cheerfulness, her smile tight, her voice an octave too high. They spoke in careful tones, as if the house itself might shatter if they acknowledged the truth. But the truth has a way of making itself known. By the end of the first week, the late notice arrived, an envelope from the bank, thick and ominous, addressed to both Ethan and me. I heard Lisa tear it open in the kitchen, her sharp intake of breath slicing through the air. "Ethan," she hissed, waving the letter like a flag of war. "They're saying we're past due on the mortgage." I listened from the living room, a quiet observer, my knitting needles clicking softly. Ethan's footsteps pounded toward the kitchen, the low murmur of their voices building into a frantic storm. I could hear Lisa's voice rising. "How could this happen? She can't just stop paying," but I had, and there was nothing they could do to change it. Day by day, the cracks in their facade grew wider. Lisa started leaving earlier for work, her eyes darting nervously when she passed me in the hall. Ethan stayed up late, pacing the living room, staring at spreadsheets on his laptop, muttering numbers under his breath. I could feel the weight of the unpaid $100 mortgage hanging over them like a storm cloud. 2 weeks in the final notice arrived. I watched Lisa read it, her hands trembling, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. 30 days, she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We have 30 days to catch up, or..." She trailed off, eyes wide. "Or we lose the house." They were feeling it now, the weight of my absence. Every dollar I had quietly funneled into their lives was now a gaping hole in their budget. The groceries I had paid for, the utilities I had helped cover, the small gifts I had bought for the kids, all gone. And the mortgage, the very roof over their heads, was crumbling beneath them. I kept my distance, saying little, offering no comfort. It wasn't out of spite. It was a lesson. A quiet, undeniable truth. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Ethan finally approached me. His voice was strained, heavy with a tension he couldn't mask. "Mom, can we talk?" I looked up from my knitting, raising an eyebrow. "Of course." He hesitated, shifting awkwardly in the doorway. "About the mortgage. Lisa and I, well, we didn't realize how much you were paying. We just assumed." "You assumed I was a burden," I said softly, not unkindly but firmly. "You assumed I was here to take, not to give. And now you see." He swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. "Can you help us just for a little while longer?" I studied him, really looked at him, the boy I had raised, the man he had become, the husband who had let his wife speak for him, and I felt a twinge of sadness, but also a sense of resolve. I said my voice even, but I won't. His mouth opened, but no words came. He looked small in that moment, diminished. Lisa appeared in the doorway. Then arms crossed her face, pale, but her eyes hard. So that's it. You're just going to let us drown. I stood slowly, folding my knitting into my lap. My voice was calm, measured. You're adults. This is your house, your mortgage, your responsibility. I gave what I could for years. Now it's your turn. Her eyes flashed, but I didn't flinch. I let the silence settle, let the weight of my words hang heavy in the air. And then I delivered the final blow, the one they never saw coming. Oh, and one more thing, I added almost as an afterthought. I spoke to the bank today. They said if you don't refinance in the next 2 weeks, they'll begin foreclosure proceedings. Lisa's face drained of color. Ethan's breath hitched. The shock was palpable, like a glass shattering in the quiet room. You called the bank? Lisa stammered. I nodded. Yes. I wanted to be clear about my options. And now you're clear about yours. There it was, the shift. The moment they realized they had lost control. The smug superiority. The dismissive glances, the whispered conversations about me being a burden. All of it crumbled in the face of cold, hard reality. They had underestimated me. They had written me off as an old woman, a guest in their home, a drain on their lives. But they forgot. I was the one holding the keys. And now they had to figure out how to survive without me. I turned, leaving them standing there in stunned silence, and walked down the hallway to my room. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. The days that followed were a chess game. Every move they made, I anticipated. Every glance, every whisper behind closed doors, it was all part of a pattern I'd seen before. The difference now, I wasn't playing defense anymore. I had flipped the board. Lisa tried first. Of course she did. She started leaving glossy brochures for retirement communities on the kitchen counter, casual, as if they'd appeared by magic. Her voice when she spoke to me was laced with fake concern. Mary, don't you think you'd be happier somewhere with people your age? They have bingo nights, yoga classes, your own space. I smiled, folded the brochure neatly and set it aside. Thank you for thinking of me. I said, my tone warm but my eyes steady. But I'm not going anywhere. Her jaw tightened, a flash of frustration crossing her face. Ethan, meanwhile, tried to play the peacekeeper. He brought me tea in the afternoons, asked how I was feeling, offered to help carry groceries. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. Mom, we didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome. It's just tight times, you know, tight times. I almost laughed. Tight times they hadn't noticed when I was paying half their mortgage. I let him talk, nodding, gently, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then the calls started. First, a polite reminder from the bank. Then a second, more urgent. I could hear Lisa's voice rising in the next room, sharp and clipped. No, we'll have the payment in. We're working on it. Yes, I understand. Ethan stopped looking me in the eyes altogether. By the third week, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. The kids felt it too quiet at dinner, glancing nervously between their parents. I tried to keep things light, chatting with them about school, about their favorite books. But even they seemed to sense the storm brewing. One evening, as Lisa banged pots in the kitchen with a little too much force, she snapped. Mary! We can't keep living like this, she hissed, turning to face me. Her hands planted firmly on the counter. Her voice was sharp, her eyes blazing. The bank is calling every day. We can't refinance without your signature. You need to help us. I set down my book, folded my glasses, and looked up at her calmly. I don't need to do anything, Lisa. Her mouth opened, closed. She wasn't used to that, me saying no. Me refusing to play the part of the quiet, helpful mother-in-law in the background. She tried again. Her voice softened. Her posture shifted, hands clasped, head tilted slightly, an attempt at humility. "Please, Mary, think of the kids. Think of what this could do to them." I tilted my head, matching her tone perfectly. "I am thinking of them. I'm teaching them a lesson. Respect is earned, not assumed." Lisa's face flushed, her eyes narrowing. The mask was slipping. "Ethan!" she called out, voice rising like a siren in the night. He appeared in the doorway, his expression pinched, exhausted. "Mom, please. We're not bad people. We just didn't realize." I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "No, Ethan. You didn't realize. You didn't realize that every time I cooked dinner, every time I paid the grocery bill, every time I watched your kids while you went out, I was contributing. You let her call me a burden and you stayed silent. Now you get to feel what it's like when the person you rely on walks away." The silence was deafening, and then I added softly, "This house, this mortgage, it's not just numbers on a paper. It's a reflection of how you treat people. If you want to keep it, figure it out." Lisa's eyes flashed a storm of emotions behind them. Anger, fear, desperation. She opened her mouth, but I could see it. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, a formal letter arrived from the bank, final notice before foreclosure proceedings. The words were stark printed in bold, demanding attention. They sat at the kitchen table, the letter between them, heads bowed. I walked past them quietly, pouring myself a cup of tea, the scent of jasmine filling the air. The tension clung to the walls like humidity before a storm. And then Ethan spoke, barely a whisper. "Mom, will you sign the refinance papers?" I turned, my face calm, my voice steady. "No," a single word, simple, final. Lisa let out a sound half-sob, half-gasp. Ethan's shoulders slumped forward in defeat. I let the moment sit. Let it sink in. Let the truth fill every corner of the house they had once ruled so confidently. And then, almost as an afterthought, I said, "You have options. Sell the car. Cut back on the vacations. Figure it out. Like adults." That night I slept like a rock. They didn't ask again. The storm finally broke on a gray Thursday morning. The kind of day where the air feels heavy with unspoken things. I was in the kitchen brewing a cup of tea when I heard Lisa's voice, sharp, panicked, louder than usual. "They said they'll start the foreclosure process next week," she hissed, her voice cracking. "Ethan, we have to do something. We're out of time." I heard the rustle of papers, the frantic tapping of keys, the desperation thick in the air. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the jasmine notes linger on my tongue. Ethan's voice was low, almost a whisper, but I could hear the tremble. "What can we do? We can't refinance without Mom's signature. The credit, it won't go through." Silence. A pause so long I thought maybe they had given up. But then Lisa's voice came, soft and dangerous, the kind of voice that slices more than it soothes. "There's another way," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. I set my cup down, careful, steady. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I just listened. "If she's declared mentally unfit, we could get power of attorney. It's not hard. We just need a doctor's note. It's for the kids, Ethan. We have to think about the kids." For a long moment there was no sound. Just the low hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall. Ethan didn't answer. I felt the weight of it. Lisa's plan, their desperation, their willingness to cross a line I never thought they'd dare touch. And that was it. That was the final twist, the last straw. The line in the sand. I stood my chair, scraping back slowly, the sound slicing through the quiet house. I walked calmly into the dining room, where they both froze like children, caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Lisa's mouth opened in shock, her eyes wide, but no words came out. Ethan's face drained of color. I heard everything I said, my voice low, controlled, almost gentle. "And let me make this very clear. If you even think about trying to take my rights away, you will lose more than just this house." Lisa tried to recover her voice, trembling. "Mary, we were just... I didn't mean no." I cut in, my tone sharp final. "You meant every word. You thought you could manipulate me, paint me as weak as a burden, as disposable. But you forgot something important." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper. The declaration of co-ownership, signed and notarized, a document they had likely never bothered to read fully. "This house isn't just yours. My name is on the deed. I own 50%. Lisa's breath hitched. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. "And if you think the bank won't listen to me..." I continued, my voice steady, calm like a blade slicing through butter. "Think again. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I know my rights." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper only they could hear. "Try me. See what happens." Lisa's face crumpled, a mixture of fear and rage warring for control. Ethan's shoulders sagged, defeated. "But I wasn't done. You have 10 days to figure out your finances," I said, my tone businesslike, as if I were discussing the weather. "After that, I'm filing for partition of the property. The house will be sold. You'll get your half, I'll get mine, and you'll be left with whatever the bank doesn't take." Lisa let out a strangled sound, half sob, half gasp. Ethan buried his face in his hands. I turned and walked away, leaving them in the wreckage of their own making. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. For the first time in months, I felt free. I sat in the garden, the breeze cool on my skin, the scent of roses heavy in the air. The world felt lighter, brighter, as if the weight I'd been carrying had finally been lifted. They had underestimated me. They thought they could take advantage of my kindness, my love, my history with them. They thought I was just an old woman in their way, but they were wrong. I was a storm they didn't see coming, and I had just torn their world apart without raising my voice, without slamming a door, without lifting a hand, just by walking away. I heard everything I said, my voice low calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. And let me make this very clear. If you even think about trying to take my rights away, you'll regret it, in ways you haven't even begun to imagine. Lisa's mouth fell open in a silent gasp, her carefully constructed composure crumbling into fragments. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes darting from me to her, his face pale and pinched. "You think I'm just some old woman you can push aside?" I continued, my voice steady, my words measured like a lawyer in a courtroom. "Think again. I've been quiet for too long. I paid for this house, for your family, for your life, and I will not be erased." The room was so still I could hear the ticking of the clock in the hallway. It was a sound I'd heard 1,000 times before, but now it felt like a countdown, except this time, the countdown wasn't for me. It was for them. "I've spoken with my lawyer," I added, my gaze locked on Lisa. Her breath hitched audibly. "Any attempt to declare me mentally unfit will trigger an immediate legal investigation. Every conversation, every bank statement, every whispered word documented. And I'm prepared to press charges for elder abuse, if necessary." Lisa recoiled as if I had slapped her. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of everything crashing down on him like a tidal wave. And then I softened just a little. Not for them, but for myself. Because in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need to fight them anymore. I had already won. The house, the mortgage, the weight of their expectations. It was no longer mine to carry. I had set it down. And what I felt in the quiet aftermath wasn't anger. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was freedom. The next week I moved out. I packed my few belongings into 2 suitcases and called a cab. I didn't tell them where I was going. I didn't owe them that. I left behind the furniture I had bought, the dishes I had washed, the linens I had folded. I left it all like shedding an old skin that no longer fit. I found a small apartment on the other side of town, a one-bedroom with a balcony that overlooked a garden, blooming with lavender and hydrangeas. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every inch of it mine. I filled the space with soft light, warm blankets, and the scent of jasmine tea. I cooked what I liked when I liked. I read books late into the night without anyone sighing loudly or glancing at the clock. I watered my plants and watched the sun set in quiet peace. I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without asking permission. Every so often, a letter would arrive from the bank addressed to Ethan and Lisa, and I'd smile to myself. I had given them 30 days. I wondered if they had figured it out, if they had scrambled to refinance, to scrape together the payments. But I didn't wonder for long. It wasn't my concern anymore. I received a message from Ethan once, a short text that read simply, "I'm sorry." No punctuation, no explanation. Just 2 words that came too late. I didn't reply, because sometimes the best response is silence. Months passed and life settled into a new rhythm. I joined a small book club at the library. I took walks in the park. I baked banana bread again this time, for me warm and golden on a plate by the window. And I thought about the lesson I had learned. About respect, about boundaries. About what it means to stand up for yourself when everyone else expects you to stay small. They had called me a burden. They had underestimated my strength. But in the end, they were the ones who crumbled. I had survived. I had thrived. And now I was free. If you're listening to this, I want you to remember something. You are not a burden. Your worth is not defined by the opinions of those who can't see your value. Stand tall. Walk away when you need to. Protect your peace like it's the last treasure on earth, because it is. Family is important, but respect is non-negotiable. And if they call you a burden, let them carry the weight of what they lost.